What's up, guys? Sluggle McDougal here. Today we're doing a 9.1 DPS tier list for Shadowlands. I know it's late, better late than never, so here we are. At the time of this recording, I've done about 20 plus 20s on my main character, which is a Fire Mage. Probably more by the time this goes live, fingers crossed. So just to give you context of this video, I'm doing it with a friend, Mephs, who does a lot of tanking, as well as DPS. We've made a tier list by ourselves. I made my own, he made his own, and then we've come together in this video to sort of compare our choices. Some differences along the way, a lot of agreement on a lot of specs. So this is in the context of, plus 20s generally, group finders, making your own groups, pugs, this sort of stuff. We're not, this has got nothing to do with the MDI and all this sort of stuff that a lot of people are talking about. This is just live service stuff, real life pugging stuff. So without any further ado, let's have a look. Yeah, 9.1 Mythic Plus for Shadowlands. Personal opinions. I mean, from various different backgrounds. I DPS a lot, Mephs tanks a lot, and that's really it. So we'll get started. First one's Warlock. What do you reckon this is? Destruction Warlock specifically.
I have it in the C tier. Yeah, I think because they bring good AoE, excellent single target, and good utility, but it's not like good enough to warrant a higher score.
So I've got them at D. To be honest, I think that they're average at best. They got to pick between AoE and single target, and when they go single target, it's okay, and then their AoE is decent. I mean, I'm alright leaving them at C. I don't really play with many of them, so it's either D or C. We'll leave them C there for the moment. But I mean, they've got all the Warlock utility, they've got health pots, they've got soul stones, they've got all that jazz. So I mean, they're okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Beastmaster.
I agree. That's a C tier for me.
C. I put it as C on mine too. I mean, it's a hunter spec. It's got all the hunter utility. Misdirect.
I think they got better utility than a Warlock does. The damage profile fits better for Mythic Plus, so I have them ranked a little higher than Destruction Warlock, but also in the same tier.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, their AoEs and cleave is substantial, especially if they're running antlers. I feel like they're alright on like a tyrannical setting. But I mean, they're just like the jack of all trade, right? They're not real standouts. Yeah, that's fine. I've actually got them as C on mine as well. And then next up is, what is this? Unholy DK.
I have them.
Go on.
Yeah, I have them just beneath Beastmaster in the C tier. The only thing they have going for them is like very strong single target. The AoE takes a bit of ramp, and they do have shorter cooldowns than Frost. But we'll get to that later. But I have them at C tier. They don't bring a lot of utility. It's mostly single target, and the AoE is rampy.
Yeah, I've got them C too. They're they can do consistent damage overall, but I mean it's not really impactful. It's a lot of cleave. It's a lot of ramp. I mean they've got battle res and all that sort of stuff too. And there's some situations with control undead that are like sort of niche and TOPs and stuff, but nothing really elevate them above the others. I don't think. All right, yeah.
You had them at the C tier as well.
I've got them as C, yeah, for sure. I'd say that they're better. I'd probably rather bring a Unholy over, say, the other two here, but it's the same stuff, really.
Yeah, they're equal to Beastmaster in my opinion. I'd bring either one.
Yeah, agreed. And what about Feral?
That's D tier for me. That's an easy one. They just don't have the AoE damage.
Yeah, I mean they're decent. I know that if they play Convoke, they've got really good single target, but I mean I don't play with them. They're a bit of a unicorn too, and I suppose what makes them, in my opinion, like D I've actually got them in C because I don't really know much about them because I don't really play with them. And if you're gonna play with a Boomkin, a Druid, then you just bring a Boomkin, right? It brings all the Boomkin brings so much more, and it's not melee.
Yeah.
So.
Boomkin is the better utility and the better damage profile, and Feral really lacks in the AoE. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Leave it there at D.
Yeah.
Speaking of Boomkins, where do you put this thing?
That's S tier.
S tier?
Yeah.
Why?
Insane AoE, insane single target, excellent utility. You got the trees, the AoE silence, the roots, the knockback, the decurse. Decurse is good in like at least half of the dungeons. The soothe, the battle res.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't actually on my list. I don't have him as high. I have him in A for me. I mean, I agree with the utility and everything. I just feel like 3 minutes is long, no matter what. Even if it's Venthyr and they're able to do the highest DPS in the game inside that window, it's just it loses value in non-fortified weeks. Sorry, non-tyrannical weeks. So you bring them to kill bosses, right? They do nothing outside of their cooldowns. They outside of cooldowns, they do tank damage, which is kind
You
of
bring them.
irritating.
Yeah, I mean, you bring them to kill everything, really. Like you just have to play around their cooldowns. You
Right.
have to. Yeah.
But 3 minutes is still, in my opinion, a long cooldown. There's no way they don't have any cooldown reduction on any of that stuff. Like say fire mages have, kindling, and there's a few ways other classes like warriors can reduce their cooldowns to 45 seconds or whatever. Boomkin doesn't have that. I do
Yeah.
agree with the knocks and the utility. I mean, they're unparalleled as far as that's concerned. And I feel like Treants is some weeks just so necessary. Things like raging affixes and that sort of stuff. I'm happy to leave them at.
Yeah.
We'll leave them at S for the moment. I mean, we can agree that they are, utility kings for sure. What about Demo? Where would you put Demo of your
That
warlocks?
is D tier. It's a lot of ramp. It's a lot of setup. Um, long cooldowns. Not enough utility. Not enough consistent AOE damage in the damage profile.
No,
Really good single target, but again, it's like very rampy.
yeah,
Uh,
and they've got like all those little bug of I don't know, something about pet specs. They've got these little like annoying and like annoyances about them where their pets won't work sometimes, or they get snagged, or they don't make it through the maze, and it's a bunch of weird stuff that happens with uh, demonology as well as like Beastmaster. I put them as
right.
D in mine as well. I mean, I don't play with many of them either, so I mean, what I have seen of them is decent, but it's not like wow factor to the point where it's like they're as good as a hunter, or as good as the other warlock specs.
Right.
All right, well that was easy. And what about enhancement? I feel like this is similar to me. I just don't. I feel like they're just another unicorn spec. You don't see many of them being played. Um,
Yeah, I have them in the C tier because their single target is excellent, and I think that their AOE is good enough, and they do have good utility. AOE cap totem, uh, tremor totem. They have a short kick. They have what's the other totem? The Earthbind totem.
mm,
They got Hex. They got Decurse. I think they make up for they're not having the best AOE. They make up for it in single target and utility.
yeah, and I suppose
But yeah, it's a C tier.
if you're running other like if you throw an arms warrior in there and maybe some other specs that benefit from Wind Fury, you've got a little bit of a niche angle going on. But yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, it's not enough to bump it up to a B. Not enough though. Like that's a C.
okay. There's
Yeah.
a lot of low specs. I mean, a lot of D's, a lot
Yeah.
of C's so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what about one of the rogue specs, assassination? Don't see much of them. I mean,
I have it in the B tier mainly because it's similar to Enhanced Shaman, but they have even better utility. Rogues across the board have the best utility in the game. The way they can control mobs, the amount of interrupts and kicks and stuns, and shroud, and the hard immunities. Um, they do great single target, which is what you need, for the lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have them at the bottom of the B tier. Like they just barely made the B tier for me.
On mine, I have them at C, but I don't really mind them in B. Again, I feel like they're sort of overshadowed by the other two specs.
Yeah,
I don't. They have the same problem in Feral in that. Like, I don't think bleed specs are necessarily very good this tier. They're just it's a lot of ramp. It's a lot of you want upfront damage.
and they
From
constantly
that
have
DPS.
to re-stealth, right?
Exactly. Yeah, something that well, at least Outlaw doesn't have that
Yeah,
handicap.
I could have that like on the higher end of the C tier or at the very bottom of the B
Yeah,
tier.
I just wonder. I mean, the reason I say C for me is because I would probably rather bring a Beastmaster than an Assassination Rogue. Like, to be honest, but I mean,
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's like if it's going to be a high tyrannical week, then maybe it's good. Again, I feel like it's an underrepresented spec, especially for rogues.
true.
It's
Yeah,
not you don't see many of them. You see a lot of them in Raid doing well, but not so much in Mythic Plus. We'll leave them B for the moment. Ret Pally, another
that's the
unicorn
C
spec.
tier. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
it in the C tier. They're just 2-minute cooldown. They're good inside their cooldowns. They're not good outside of their cooldowns, and they don't bring enough utility.
I feel like that's the big thing. I think like the damage paladins bring, it's fine. It's just their utility is trash. Like that's one of the big things. Whereas like Holy Pally brings so much. You think, well, why wouldn't a Ret fill that void? It's just, I mean, they do, but they don't at the same time. One fills a
Certain
DPS
affi-
role, and the other one fills a healer role. And
yeah, on certain affixes and on certain dungeons, a Ret Paladin could be very, very useful. If you need their dispel disease, for example, or if it's a week like Grievous, where they can off heal quite a bit. That's a thing. Like the word of glory. Is that what it's called?
yeah, well, they're
Yeah,
sinking, but I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? So they're sinking their resources into you know, healing and
yeah,
utility as opposed to just outright damage. And I think that's, you know, you would
yeah.
rather just them pump.
It's
Yeah,
a C tier for
yeah,
me.
it's a C tier for me. I mean, hard immunities are okay. That's
Ye-
really all they've got
Yeah,
going for them.
right.
Affliction Warlock,
They're good. I have them at the top of the B tier.
top of B.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is excellent AoE, excellent single target, and not much utilities for the warlocks, but it's good. I have them at the top of the B tier. They're
I,
the best of the three warlock specs
I would agree
in
with
Mythic
that
Plus.
for sure.
Yeah,
I think if you've seen a lot of them like blow up with PIs and shooting out seeds in some
yeah,
of these online videos and stuff going viral, but I I mean they're alright. I think that they have that same problem with as destruction. They got to pick between do we do massive AoE damage or do we do mediocre AoE and decent single target. So I mean they're alright. I mean we play with one from time to time, and he's always doing good overalls. But again, for me, I probably leave him B as well. They're not that impactful. Definitely not like hitting that invite button instantly when you see one sign up. Let's just put it that way.
yeah.
All right, Frost DK.
It's the same as Ret Pally in my opinion. It's a 2-minute cooldown damage bot with not a lot of utility and not a lot of damage outside of their cooldowns. They're very bursty though,
Yeah,
so that's good. But I mean, I think Unholy brings slightly better single, but I mean overall the AoE is kind of the same.
yeah. Over the
So I
duration
have
of the
them.
whole dungeon for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
have them at the C tier.
I haven't see as well. And again,
Yeah,
I like a lot of what you find, with the exception of say like Beastmaster in this tier, is like a lot of it's so niche, it's so unicorn. Like all these specs, like they're so underrepresented. I know they can do decent damage. They've got battle res and control undead and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean they don't really fill that fill the the 5-man comp with excitement. They do damage, and it's okay damage at best.
Yeah.
What about Arms Warrior? I feel like this is something that you and I are gonna disagree on.
I've seen a lot of good Arms Warriors. However, I have them in the B tier strictly because of the target cap.
Mm-hmm.
They're excellent on AoE. They're excellent on single target, and they have good utility. But yeah, I have them just beneath the Affliction Lock in the B tier. What about
Under
you?
the Affliction. I've actually got them on the high S. I think that Kyrian, with the Kyrian Legendary, with 45
High A?
second, high A. Their
Oh,
damage
okay.
overall, I think, especially as far as melee is concerned, they're second only to Windwalker Monks as far as damage is concerned. I mean, granted, there's an AOE cap, but they are absolutely pulverizing right now. And I think the 45-second spear legendary, if they run Kyrian, this is specifically for Kyrian Arms Warriors. I think that they're some of the highest DPS in the game and very consistent. They're just like the
Consistent,
consistent
yeah.
Andes of damage. Their utility's a little lacking. I mean, they've got Stormbolt and they've got Rallying Cry, attack power buff, but that's it, right? I mean, they're still a warrior at the end of the day. You'd probably still rather bring a rogue over one, but I think as far as like damage is concerned, in just that lens, they're right up there with. I mean, they're going to beat your boomies and your fire mages sometimes, especially in those smaller dungeons like Plaguefalls and TOPs, and where there's not
Yeah.
huge AOE.
Leave it at A. Yeah. I
Um,
like that they have the really short cooldown on Spear. That's
yeah,
great for Mythic Plus
I think
and
that's the big
their
takeaway.
overall damage. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What about Survival Hunter?
C tier. They actually
C.
pump. They do good damage, but it's a melee class. Uh, it's I believe it's a 2-minute cooldown class. It's in the C tier for me.
I've been playing with a few lately from my guild, and the one that I play with absolutely smashes the meters.
Yeah.
Yeah, Unicorn though. I mean, as you said, it's all the same. They're melee. You've got Marksman and BM. I'd probably rather bring one over like an Affliction Warlock. Um, but
Hmm.
utility wise, I mean, they're a hunter, I suppose.
They
I
have
think
a shorter kick, don't they?
they do have a shorter kick. Yeah, it's a melee kick. Yeah. I mean, they're good. I don't mind them. Again, just a unicorn spec. You just don't see many of them, but their damage is really good.
Right.
The bombs and AOE settings, they're really good.
Yeah.
The single target's decent. I
I
mean,
would bring either one. I'd bring a BM or a Survival Hunter. They're
yeah,
kind of equal to me. Yeah.
it's not kind of equal. Yeah, I don't mind
But
putting them
you
down
could put
there.
it in C.
I mean,
B or
well,
C is fine.
yeah, I think higher C, bottom B. I mean, and maybe with more representation, they would go higher. But I've seen Dr. J and a few others play them and do some pretty impressive things for them. But yeah, we'll leave them there for the moment. What about Shadow
Yeah.
Priest? This is a contentious one, I think. A little
This was
hit
a
and
tough
miss.
one for me to decide because if you if you're doing really high keys, they can do insane AoE, but I think overall they just have excellent AoE. I have them in the B tier. It's a excellent
Yeah,
AoE, excellent single target. But inside of a lust, they do insane single target. But I think, you know, in Mythic Plus, their cooldowns are a little awkward. You never really want to sit on a 1.5 minute cooldown. So I got them in the B tier.
you got them before. I mean, I'd probably rather bring one than an affliction. I put them. Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same boat. I think
They're about in the middle of my B tier. They're in the middle of
BT.
my B tier.
I
Yeah.
mean, I feel the same way. I think that now that they're running Necro, it's a little bit better. They
Yeah.
kind of pump. Maining Fire Mage and a few others, I think that the whole the whole Night Fae build was kind of cool. If they weren't, if they were able to give their PIs away, but they're not doing that anymore. Um,
I think
there's,
in really high keys, yeah, they could fall into that A tier. or at the top of the B tier, just because the mobs stay alive for so much longer.
Yeah. I think
Yeah, for
high
sure.
fortified keys, you see them like sustained AoE. They do really good
Yeah,
with Searing Nightmare. And then on tyrannical weeks, they're able to pick up the solo damage at single target. I don't play with enough of them, but I don't mind them. I feel like that's one of the classes too, out of all these classes on the board right now, that the player, like the skill cap for the player, is really high for Shadow Priest. You can get Shadow
yeah,
Priests that are really good, and then you can get Shadow Priests that are really bad, and there's no real reason for it other than the person playing that tune. I feel like they're a very
yeah.
high skill
I
cap for
I
that.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
difficult one to
really,
play.
if you are bringing one in high keys, you're almost always PIing someone else.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
And
I don't know if that's the case nowadays though with the Necro. I know it was back 9.1.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they're just a standalone PI bot. I could be wrong, but I don't mind them. I think for that one, like if you know any Shadow Priests, if he's good, bring him. If you don't know him, it's a roll of the
Right.
dice. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Fury Warrior?
They're in the B. I have them in the B tier above Assassination Rogue. Um, I don't play with enough of them. Um, don't have a lot of information on them. I would much rather bring an Arms Warrior. But I think all the good Fury Warriors play Night Fae in keys. It's Night Fae or Kyrian,
Mm-hmm.
and um, that ability, Ancient Aftershock, that's a really powerful ability.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of utility. It's consistent damage. They're B tier.
BT.
What about you?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got them as BT. I mean, their damage, like Arms, is exceptional. I mean, it's very consistent. It's very high. They run anger management. You know, they've got a good legendary. Uh, they're really good on like explosive weeks. Anything that's 5 target cleave or less, they're probably the best in the game. But
yeah,
the way that the dungeons are built up and AOE being so prevalent, they sort of drop off really hard, more so than arms. The more targets you bring in. But if you're able to keep
right.
5 targets, for them to just feed into, they're really solid. Not a bad choice. Again, I'd agree with the arms example. I would definitely bring in arms if I had the
Yeah,
choice. But they're good. I mean, damage wise, they're fine, right? Utility, it's whatever. Next up, Frost Mage.
this was a tough one, but I put them in the B tier
B.
because they're the single target is just not. It's not. It's great, but it's great only if you have icy veins and some procs.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a second target to cleave on. But it's it's excellent AoE. It's great single target. It's great utility. But if you die with icy veins up, you're toast.
Yep.
There goes your overall. Um, I'd much rather bring the other two specs of mage, but they're a great class, and it's a very popular class. There's a lot of high scores with Frost Mage, and that may be because of their popularity, but they're very good. They're very
Yeah.
good. I got to keep them in the B though.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the +20 timed keys, I think they're the most represented mage spec. I
Yeah.
have played Frost extensively, and I would put them in B too. The biggest
Yeah.
weakness of them is just this icy veins mechanic. While really fun when you stay alive, if you die inside of icy veins, your damage is completely gimped until that cooldown comes up. And if you die, it's 3 minutes, right? So if you die early for whatever reason, it's a huge problem. And their
I
damage,
think
while consistent, just isn't very bursty. And I feel like sometimes in Mythic Plus, or a lot of the times, you want to be able to just burn something down really quickly. Frost is
yeah.
the opposite to that. Frost is just a
Yeah,
consistent
and I would
heavy
say
cleave
more
consider
often
plus.
than not, the when you're fighting the lieutenants for the seasonal fix, you're fighting them alone more
Mm,
often than not.
for sure.
And they don't have the burst damage, and they don't have the humongous single target burst damage for something like that, and
There,
that's where they fall off.
there are some niche examples where I think Frost actually is the better mage spec, and one of them is on Spiteful Weeks, places where it's
Oh yeah,
very easy to get your Icy Veins up, and it's a fortified setting, and they take a long time to die. Sustain,
that's a good point.
cleave,
Yeah.
they are
Also,
good.
once you do get into the hierarchies, the 24s and 25s, you're kiting a lot,
Yeah,
and the passive slow is really good for the tanks.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, they just don't bring the burst or the single target to like really put them any higher, in my opinion.
I agree with that. B, I put them in B too.
Yeah.
Next up, this is a big one. The old Windwalker Monk.
I think we both agree that this is the S tier. This is the top of the S tier. This is the
Yeah,
best DPS class in the game right now for Mythic Plus.
yeah, it's undisputed.
Um, insane AoE, insane single target, and excellent utility. There's so many little tricks you can do with ROP and Incap, AoE stun, transcendence. They can immune magic, they can dispel disease.
Yeah,
It's an insane class.
Tiger's Lust, and now
Oh,
they're
yeah.
running the Necro Brew. I mean, with the procs
Yeah.
that they're able to get, it's out of
And
control.
they're dealing damage and healing their group at the same time with Chi Wave, Chi Burst, and Bone Dust Brew.
Yeah, they're insane. I wouldn't put their single target as like an insane. I think it's okay. I wouldn't say. I think they struggle on tyrannical weeks, but just the sheer numbers that they're able to do every single minute on every single
Yeah.
trash pack is disgusting. I mean, they're
They
the new
definitely
Fire Mage.
scale. Yeah, they definitely scale better in AoE.
Hmm.
But if they have Zwen up, if they have cooldowns for a single target, like
No,
it's they pump.
yeah,
They pump.
they're
Yeah, they
decent.
blow up a boss, no problem.
I think it's really important to note that all those small things like ROP incap, like these things,
Yeah.
especially ROP at displacement, like ROP is so overpowered. It's the only spec in the game I think, oh sorry, only spell in the game that disperses like that, and it's actually super
Right.
niche and very powerful in lots of different situations, especially in
They
halls of
don't.
in TOP and some of those other
Yeah.
dungeons where you can completely avoid
Doesn't
mobs from jumping.
doesn't enter combat either.
Yeah, they're insane.
So
Well, that was an easy one.
yeah.
Next one, Marksman.
I have them in the A tier.
Me too.
Insane AoE, excellent single target, great utility. That's an A tier class.
A tier.
They pump. They pump. It's consistent, great damage profile. If they run the neck piece, the Wild Spirits neck piece,
Hmm.
it's
Well,
somewhere.
even
What's
Kyrian,
that?
they're able to have that 1 minute
Yeah,
cooldown.
yeah. Either way, they have basically a 1 minute cooldown, and they pump,
Yeah, no, I agree.
and they're ranged.
Yeah, no, I
And
agree.
the what's it called? The snare they
Binding
provide.
shot.
Binding shot's huge.
Yeah,
That's a huge spell.
no, agreed.
Probably the single best utility
I
they have.
I will say the only thing that they lack and their biggest weakness is I think same for all hunters is that their defensive sucks. Like they're very prone to dying after they use their
Yeah,
exhilarate and their
sure.
turtle. They could just get one shot by a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah,
They're a little
but
bit of a
they
glass
could,
cannon.
yeah, but they're mobile enough and they can disengage to avoid a lot of mechanics
Yep.
and stay out of range of a lot of
Yep.
mechanics.
I think a
But
big
yeah, for
one
sure, I agree.
too.
There is
The
a squishy class for sure,
yeah,
but um,
I think misdirects too are so people often look over that. Misdirect's massive. It's a
that's
really
true.
big
Yeah,
utility. Yep.
yeah.
No, I agree with that. What about Arcane Mage?
This was a little is a little tricky to me to rank this one because a lot of the WoW community, Mythic Plus community would say that they're the best spec for Mage in Mythic Plus, and a lot of the scores would depict that. But I have them in the A tier. Um, I thought about they being S tier. I don't know how the funneling works with the AoE into the single target, but it's some of the highest single target in the game. It's Balanced Druid and Arcane Mage. In my opinion, it's the two
Hmm.
top single target classes in the game. I don't play with enough of them. I haven't played an Arcane Mage in a long time, so I don't have accurate understanding of how their AoE works, but I got them at near the top of the A tier.
Yeah.
Maybe you can elaborate. Yeah.
I mean, I put them as A. I think they're better than Frost. I don't think they're as good as Fire. They're
Right.
decent. I mean, they've got a 45-second cooldown and Touch of the Magi, and then you can obviously team that up.
Yeah.
There's a big go with your Arcane Power, and then there's a smaller go with your Rune of Power. They're just a
I think.
little they're a little lackluster in terms of like just sustain damage. They got a lot of ramp. They run Arcane Harmony, Legendary,
Yeah.
which is a lot of missiles collecting your proc, and then you throw that proc or that juiced up Arcane Barrage into mobs, and that's capped at
Yeah.
5. So there's that. So outside of their big Touch of the Magi goes,
Yeah.
they're mediocre, but inside of their cooldowns, they're insane. The damage is right
Yeah.
up there with the best.
I
I
think they do very well this season because of the single target affix on
Mhm.
the lieutenants.
Yeah.
It's a great class to bring. I would never say no to an arcane mage who's got the gear.
My
Um,
one thing
yeah,
to mention between from all the mage specs and why I think it's not as good as Fire, and we'll talk a lot about Fire, is that one of the
yeah,
what Frost and Arcane don't have is they don't have a cheap death. Cauterize is insane. It's really,
yeah.
really good. And then
Right.
they don't have a disorientate, or like in the sense that Fire has DB. And these things
True.
are
Yeah,
huge. They're massive. Like that really
yeah,
puts Fire above them in and of
yeah.
itself in a 5-man content. Like it's really,
I
really
agree.
strong.
In terms of fire being better, I agree with that. I have it ranked above arcane. But we'll get to that when we
Yeah.
get to that. Yeah.
What about Elemental Shaman? This is a spec that I thought was going to be take over the S tier of 9.1. I thought I played one extensively in 9.0,
Yeah.
and I thought that they were
It's
going to
a
be
it's
the
A for me.
premier ranged.
It's
A,
A for me. Yeah.
I agree.
It's got insane AoE, insane burst AoE, excellent utility. The one thing that separates them from the from enhancement is that they can actually send their elementals through the maze in Mists of Scythe, and that's not something a resto can do either. So that
Mhm.
kind of cheeses a lot of the pulls. It helps you gather up mobs for bigger pulls and get through the dungeons faster. That separates them big time. That separates their utility, in my opinion.
I think
And
they've
their
got
AoE is the best, some of the best in the game.
yeah,
Yeah,
sustained for sure. I think when they've got
and they're tanky. They're
Stormboy.
very tanky.
Well, yeah, I mean with what's it called? Astral Shift. It's one of the best DRs in the game, isn't it?
That and then the ancestral guidance,
Hmm.
is that
Oh
what it's
yeah,
called?
yeah. Their talent that heals them.
Yeah.
They've got that, and then with them running Night Fade, they've also got burst damage and healing through that, right? So,
Yeah.
and they get some of their
A lot
mobility
of them
back.
in the hierarchies, run that 2-minute cooldown that heals the group with
Hmm.
25% of the damage you deal. Works like weeks like bursting and grievous. It's insane. But the night fade ability kind of does the same thing. If your teammates aren't in range of you, you
Right.
you can top them all off. It's like land hands for the entire group
Yeah.
if you hit enough target to charge it enough. It's insane.
Yeah.
But their single target is like middle of the pack for me, and that's why they're like at the bottom of the A tier.
Yeah. I think their single target's not bad, but you're right. It's just like lightning bolt spamming at the end of the day. It's
Yeah, it,
there's you can only go so far doing that.
it's
Um,
it's a hard class to play in when you're trying to do single target. It really
I
is.
think it's just a hard spec to play. Period. I think with the whole 2.5 minute cooldowns to Storm Alley, it doesn't
Yeah,
sound that difficult, but it kind of is. You don't want to
yeah,
waste it, and there's a ramp to that spec too, right? Kind of similar to
yeah.
Boomy, where you want to be able to ideally get your ramp very much on the way before you go into the second pack, and there's a finesse to that which takes an experienced player for sure.
But they make up for not having that single. They make up for it in the utility and the AOE.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
purge, the knockback, the in the shortest kick in the game,
Lust. Yeah, they've
the
got to go good.
lust, the earthquake, the random interrupts from earthquake. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
What about Outlaw Rogue?
That's A tier. I don't play with enough of them, but I know enough about them that's A tier.
Yeah,
That's near the top of A tier for me. Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, they haven't changed at all.
No.
Their spot's been pretty basically the same since BFA. I mean, with the
The
exception of them
damage
being
profile
capped.
for Mythic Plus, yeah.
Um,
The damage profile for Mythic Plus is excellent. The single target's excellent. The utility is insane.
yeah.
It's a great class for Mythic Plus. Yeah.
They've also got a little like few niche things going for them with the acrobatic strikes and being able to like pseudo
Oh,
be ranged a little bit, so they
yeah,
can
a little bit. Yeah.
have a lot of uptime on
Positioning. Yeah.
other on mobs that other classes can't touch, which is good. I mean, utility, they're still a rogue, right? I mean, utility alone puts rogues so far up, even if they were doing no damage at all. Yeah, I put them in A too,
I
for
I
sure.
know in the MDI right now going on, a lot of the rogues are playing subtlety, but personally for the top some of the hardest keys that people are doing right now, I think Outlaw is the better spec to bring.
Yeah. And people think that it's not a very good single target spec. Outlaw actually has extremely good single target, like in
Yeah.
comparatively with their other like their rogue counterparts. I mean, they're going to do as much as Assassination and Sub. I mean, I haven't seen them drop off all that much. I've played with a few, and
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I like bringing them for sure. I'm never going to say no to a good rogue.
Yeah.
Next up, Fire Mage.
Now, I had this at the top of the A tier, and I know you
Okay.
probably have it in the S tier, and that's fine. So I could see it at either one.
I think yeah. I mean, why A and not S? Why isn't it an S? Was
They're not what they used to be, you know?
yeah. I agree. They're not as strong. I will say
Yeah.
that compared to like, I put them in the S tier personally,
Uh,
just because
Now that
the
I'm
higher the
thinking about
key
it, yeah.
goes, the longer the trash packs are, and so
Now that I'm
the
thinking about it,
you're able to get minute combust on everything.
when I was analyzing them, I really didn't take into consideration the Dragon's Breath or the Cauterize, and that might be the difference maker into bumping them up to an S tier.
I would put them. I mean, this is bias, obviously, because I main one. I would put them better than a Boomkin and second to Windwalker. Just, I mean,
Yeah,
as far as the other mage specs are concerned, they've
I'm
got,
perfectly okay with that.
and the big thing that's really strong about them is that they've got, similar to Arcane, they've got multiple different ways of dealing damage. They've got really, really strong single target combust rotations, and they've got
Yeah,
very, very strong AoE combust, and then you've got these sort of like pseudo mini combust where you can get them under a minute by hitting your shifting power quick and then finishing off mobs, and then you've got affixes like raging, for example, where you can a fire mage can combust the end of a pack too, the last 30% where they're all raging. So there's a few niche situations like that that they excel at. And the higher the key goes, the more you're able to get that fire mage is able to have combustion up for each pack. So you're
yeah,
doing 15, 16, 17s. I would say that they suck. I'd say that they're like not a good spec at all. The moment you start going into 22, 23, 24 territory and they're able to combust every single pack, that's when you're like, wow, this spec's still really good.
yeah.
Yeah, I would put them as A. I mean, I'm happy to put them as. We can put them at the end here.
No, I think they're better than balanced druids now that I think about it more.
Yeah, and the big thing too, I will mention is that Frost gets more benefit in say a fortified week. Arcane gets more benefit in a tyrannical week. Fire's able to do both.
Both. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and equally as good, I think.
Yeah.
What about Havoc?
Havoc is really good. That's A tier for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent AoE, excellent single target, excellent utility, just across the board overall. Good damage profile, consistent damage. It's one of the harder classes to play right now with whatever momentum build. I don't know if that's what they're doing. The long cooldown, you got to know when to use it. You got to kind of pull around them a bit, but if you have a good one in the group, they can carry.
I
Yeah.
reckon they're huge. I mean, they've got out of combat CC, they've got a range kick, multiple stuns, AoE stuns, single target stun. They bring 5% extra magic damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as like melee are concerned, I think it's like these 3 Windwalker, arms, and then Havoc are just their output's insane. I played with a few Havoc, and they're always at the top of the meters. At the
Yep.
end of the dungeon, very, very, very consistent. Just
Yep.
yeah, and they're not as brain dead as what they were in previous seasons.
Right.
They're a little bit more finesse, and they do a lot more single target and a few other things, which is
A lot more burst with the hunt,
yeah,
which is good this season.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah. And last one is Subtlety Rogue.
It's A tier. I
Eh?
have it. Yeah, I have it beneath Arcane, but I had it higher than Outlaw. Or I'm sorry, I had Outlaw higher. I had Outlaw at the top of the A,
Something like
but it
this.
doesn't really matter. Um, mine's a little different, but you don't have to duplicate it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's worthwhile shuffling things around. I don't think there's any. I mean, if
I had
I'd probably put this
I had
somewhere
it
up around here though.
Outlaw, Arcane, Subtlety, Havoc, Elemental, Marksman.
Yeah. Okay. It's similar.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk a little
Um,
about sub. I mean,
consistent damage, excellent AoE, excellent single target, insane utility. Don't play with enough of them. Maybe you've played with more of them this tier.
yeah. I mean, they've got that niche in the sense that they're able to use that black powder to do AOE, or they're able to, uh, you know, funnel that into eviscerates and primary targets. See a lot of them
Yeah.
in the MDI. I think they're playing a niche in the MDI. I don't think that's
Right.
like something that should be considered the normal. I think they're
Right.
really good. Some of the rogues that I play with, I will say play multiple specs. They'll switch between outlaw and sub given the dungeon. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that wherever there's high, priority damage that they think they need, sub obviously plays that role better than outlaw. And outlaw is just a little bit more all-rounded, less specialized, more just throughput.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, looking at this one final time, is there any changes you'd make?
Um. No. No.
I think that's about. I mean, yeah. I mean, the only thing I would change is that I think the more I think about the rogues, the more value I think Assassination loses, in my opinion. Because if you
Yeah.
think about the other two specs, it's just so much better than Assassination. But other than that, it's fine. I mean, I think that's about it. I mean, if you look at the ladder and you look at like timed keys and all this sort of stuff, it definitely reflects what you see on Radar.io and what you see in the best timed keys and best untimed keys. It's a similar sort of thing. Um, all these classes are represented,
Yeah.
especially from A up. You know what I mean? Like it seems to be that the ones in A and S, they either do one or two things. One provide just exceptional, so like such game changing utility that you have to bring one, or their damage is
Right.
just broken and they're just, how could you not bring one, right?
Yeah.
And then everything else below it is just like jack of all trade, master of none. So that's it. That's the tier list for 9.1. Tell me if you agree in the comments below. Perhaps we're wrong, perhaps we're right. All the reference points will be in the description below. Thanks again for stopping by. Cheers. Catch you around.